Chapter 19 of The Log of a Cowboy by Andy Adams. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. 40 Islands Ford. After securing a count on the herd that morning and finding nothing short, we trailed out up the North Platte River. It was an easy country in which to handle a herd. The trail in places would run back from the river as far as 10 miles, and again follow close in near the river bottoms. There was an abundance of small creeks putting into this fork of the Platte from the south, which afforded water for the herd and good campgrounds at night. Only twice after leaving Ogallala had we been compelled to go to the river for water for the herd, and with the exception of thunderstorms and occasional summer rains, the weather had been all one could wish. For the past week, as we trailed up the North Platte, some of us had visited the river daily to note its stage of water, for we were due to cross at 40 Islands, about 12 miles south of old Fort Laramie. The North Platte was very similar to the South Canadian, a wide, sandy stream without banks, and our experience with the latter was fresh in our memories. The stage of water had not been favorable, for this river also had its source in the mountains, and as now midsummer was upon us, the season of heavy rainfall in the mountains, augmented by the melting snows, the prospect of finding a fordable stage of water at 40 Islands was not very encouraging. We reached this well-known crossing late in the afternoon, the third day after leaving the Wyoming line, and found one of the Prairie Cattle Company's herds waterbound. This herd had been wintered on one of that company's ranges on the Arkansas River in southern Colorado, and their destination was in the Badlands near the mouth of the Yellowstone, where the same company had a northern range. Flood knew the foreman, Wade Scholar, who reported having been waterbound over a week already with no prospect of crossing without swimming. Scholar knew the country thoroughly and had decided to lie over until the river was fordable at 40 Islands, as it was much the easiest crossing on the North Platte, though there was a wagon ferry at Fort Laramie. He returned with Flood to our camp, and the two talked over the prospect of swimming it on the morrow. "Let's send the wagons up to the ferry in the morning," said Flood, "and swim the herds. If you wait until this river falls, you are liable to have an experience like we had on the South Canadian, lost 3 days and bogged over 100 cattle. When one of these sandy rivers has had a big freshet, look out for quicksands. But you know that as well as I do. Why, we've swum over half a dozen rivers already, and I'd much rather swim this one than attempt to ford it just after it has fallen. We can double our outfits and be safely across before noon. I've got nearly 1,000 miles yet to make, and have just got to get over. Think it over tonight, and have your wagon ready to start with ours." Scholar rode away without giving our foreman any definite answer as to what he would do, though earlier in the evening he had offered to throw his herd well out of the way at the ford and lend us any assistance at his command. But when it came to the question of crossing his own herd, he seemed to dread the idea of swimming the river, and could not be induced to say what he would do, but said that we were welcome to the lead. The next morning Flood and I accompanied our wagon up to his camp, where it was plainly evident that he did not intend to send his wagon with ours, and McCann started on alone, though our foreman renewed his efforts to convince Scholar of the feasibility of swimming the herds. Their cattle were thrown well away from the ford, and Scholar assured us that his outfit would be on hand whenever we were ready to cross, and even invited all hands of us to come to his wagon for dinner. When returning to our herd, Flood told me that Scholar was considered one of the best foremen on the trail, and why he should refuse to swim his cattle was unexplainable. He must have time to burn, but that doesn't seem reasonable, for the earlier through cattle were turned loose on their winter range, the better. We were in no hurry to cross, as our wagon would be gone all day, and it was nearly high noon when we trailed up to the ford. With the addition to our force of Scholar and 9 or 10 of his men, we had an abundance of help, and put the cattle into the water opposite two islands, our saddle horses in the lead as usual. There was no swimming water between the south shore and the first island, though it wet our saddle skirts for some considerable distance, this channel being nearly 200 yards wide. Most of the outfit took the water, while Scholar's men fed our herd in from the south bank, a number of their men coming over as far as the first island. The second island lay down the stream some little distance, and as we pushed the cattle off the first one, we were in swimming water in no time. But the saddle horses were already landing on the second island, and our lead cattle struck out, and breasting the water, swam as proudly as swans. The middle channel was nearly 100 yards wide, the greater portion of which was swimming, though the last channel was much wider. But our saddle horses had already taken it, and within 50 yards of the farther shore struck solid footing. With our own outfit, we crowded the leaders to keep the chain of cattle unbroken, and before Honeyman could hustle his horses out of the river, our lead cattle had caught a foothold and were heading upstream and edging out for the farther shore. I had one of the best swimming horses in our outfit, and Flood put me in the lead on the point. As my horse came out on the farther bank, I am certain I have never seen a herd of cattle before or since which presented a prettier sight when swimming than ours did that day. There were fully 400 yards of water on the angle by which we crossed, nearly half of which was swimming, but with the two islands, which gave them a breathing spell, our circle dots were taking the water as steadily as a herd leaving their bed ground. Scholar and his men were feeding them in, while half a dozen of our men on each island were keeping them moving. Honeyman and I pointed them out of the river, and as they grazed away from the shore, they spread out fan-like, many of them kicking up their heels after they left the water in healthy enjoyment of their bath. Long before they were half over, the usual shouting had ceased, and we simply sat in our saddles and waited for the long train of cattle to come up and cross. Within less than half an hour from the time our saddle horses entered the North Platte, the tail end of our herd had landed safely on the farther bank. As Honeyman and I were the only ones of our outfit on the north side of the river during the passage, Flood called to us from across the last channel to graze the herd until relieved, when the remainder of the outfit returned to the south side to recover their discarded effects and to get dinner with Scholar's wagon. I had imitated Honeyman and tied my boots to my cantle strings so that my effects were on the right side of the river, and as far as dinner was concerned, well, I'd much rather miss it than swim the Platte twice in its then stage of water. There's a difference in daring in one's duty and daring out of pure venturesomeness, and if we missed our dinners, it would not be the first time. So we were quite willing to make the sacrifice. If the Quirk family never achieve fame for daring by field and flood until this one of the old man boys brings the family name into prominence, it will be hopelessly lost to posterity. We allowed the cattle to graze of their own free will and merely turned in the sides and rear, but on reaching the second bottom of the river, where they caught a good breeze, they lay down for their noonday siesta, which relieved us of all work but keeping watch over them. The saddle horses were grazing about in plain view on the first bottom, so Honeyman and I dismounted on a little elevation overlooking our charges. We were expecting the outfit to return promptly after dinner was over, for it was early enough in the day to have trailed 8 or 10 miles farther. It would have been no trouble to send someone up the river to meet our wagon and pilot McCann to the herd, for the trail left on a line due north from the river. We had been lounging about for an hour while the cattle were resting when our attention was attracted by our saddle horses in the bottom. They were looking at the ford, to which we supposed their attention had been attracted by the swimming of the outfit, but instead only 2 of the boys showed up, and on sighting us nearly a mile away, they rode forward very leisurely. Before their arrival,